I stared at my mother's text message, my coffee growing cold beside my laptop. "We need your help," it read. "Please call us." 3 years earlier, I had stood in my childhood home as my sister uttered those cutting words. "No one wants you here." And my mother had nodded in silent agreement. Now, I sat in my corner office overlooking the city skyline, the founder of a company worth 8 figures, faced with a decision that would determine what family truly meant to me. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The invitation to my niece's graduation party arrived unexpectedly on a Tuesday morning, a cream-colored envelope with my sister Victoria's precise handwriting. I had been distant from my family for months, focusing on building my small business, while they continued their usual gatherings without much thought to my absence. Still, this invitation felt like an olive branch, a chance to reconnect with the people who had known me longest, if not always best. I spent more time than I'd like to admit choosing the right gift. Ella had always been interested in photography, so I found a vintage film camera in pristine condition, along with a leather case engraved with her initials. It was expensive, but I could finally afford such gestures after 2 years of relentless work building my marketing consultancy. I was proud of what I'd accomplished, going from a cramped apartment office to a team of 5 with clients across the country. The Sunday of the party arrived with perfect June weather, sunlight filtering through trees that lined my sister's suburban street. I parked between a Mercedes and a BMW. My brother-in-law Richard came from money and had done well in commercial real estate. My modest sedan, while new, looked out of place. I reminded myself that I wasn't there to compare financial standings, but to celebrate Ella's achievement and perhaps mend some family bridges. The front door was unlocked, voices and laughter flowing from the backyard. I made my way through the house, noting the new furniture, the updated kitchen. Success looked good on Victoria. It always had. As her younger sister, I had grown up in her shadow, watching as she effortlessly achieved everything our parents valued: prestigious college, successful husband, beautiful home, 2 well-behaved children. My path had been less linear, with false starts and changes in direction that my family had viewed with thinly veiled disappointment. "Look who finally showed up," Victoria said as I stepped onto the back patio. Her tone was light, but there was an edge to it that immediately put me on guard. Ella spotted me and rushed over, her graduation cap still perched on her head. "Aunt Claire, you made it!" Her genuine excitement eased some of my tension. "I wouldn't miss it," I said, handing her the carefully wrapped package. "Congratulations, sweetheart." My mother approached, offering a brief hug. "We thought you might be too busy with your little business," she said, the word little carrying more weight than it should have. "It's keeping me busy, but I'm managing," I replied, determined to maintain positivity. "We just signed 2 new clients last week." "That's nice, dear," she said dismissively. "Richard's firm just closed on that new development downtown." The mayor attended the ribbon cutting. And there it was, the familiar reminder that whatever I achieved would always be measured against Victoria and Richard's success. I swallowed my frustration and moved to greet other guests, many of whom were surprised to see me. "The prodigal daughter returns," my uncle remarked. Not unkindly, but with enough emphasis to suggest my attendance was unexpected. For the next hour, I made small talk, accepted backhanded compliments about finally settling down with a real job, and watched as Victoria held court, the perfect hostess in her perfect home. I reminded myself that I was there for Ella, focusing on her excitement about college in the fall. When it was time for cake, Richard called everyone together. He made a speech about Ella's accomplishments, Victoria's exceptional parenting, and their pride in the young woman their daughter had become. It was heartfelt and appropriate. Then he added, "And of course, we want to acknowledge our family who've joined us today. especially those who manage to fit us into their busy schedules. Several eyes turned toward me, and I felt my cheeks warm. The comment was unnecessary, pointed. I maintained my smile, refusing to show how much it stung. After the cake, I helped clean up, carrying plates to the kitchen where Victoria was loading the dishwasher. "You didn't need to bring such an expensive gift," she said without looking up. "It seems excessive." "I wanted to get her something special," I replied. "She's always loved photography." "Well, it makes the other gifts look inadequate," Victoria continued. "That's always been your problem, Claire. You have to make a statement instead of just fitting in." I set down the plates carefully, taking a breath before responding. It wasn't about making a statement. It was about giving my niece something meaningful. Victoria straightened, finally meeting my eyes. "Is that why you've been absent for months? Because you're so concerned with being meaningful?" "I've been building a business, Victoria. It takes time and energy." "We all have demands on our time," she countered. "Richard works 60-hour weeks and still makes it to family dinners. Mom and Dad aren't getting any younger, you know." The guilt trip was familiar territory, but this time, something in me refused to accept it. My work matters to me. I'm creating something from nothing, without the advantages Richard had starting out. Victoria's eyes narrowed. There it is. Always the victim, always the one who had it harder. Poor Claire, fighting against the world while the rest of us had everything handed to us. "That's not what I said." "It's what you always imply," she interrupted. "Maybe if you had made better choices along the way, you wouldn't be struggling with your little business at 35. The condescension in her voice ignited something in me. Not just anger, but a sudden clarity. This dynamic wasn't new. It had defined our relationship since childhood. Victoria, the successful one, always knowing better. Me, the perpetual disappointment, never quite measuring up. "My business is doing well, actually," I said, keeping my voice level. "We've doubled our revenue this year." Victoria rolled her eyes. "Right. That's why you still drive that car and wear the same clothes you had 2 years ago." Meanwhile, Richard and I just bought a vacation property in Sedona. In that moment, I realized how completely Victoria defined success, by what could be displayed, compared, envied. The revelation was both illuminating and profoundly sad. "I'm investing back into the business," I explained, though I knew it wouldn't matter. "And honestly, I'm proud of what I've built, even if it doesn't impress you." "No one's asking you to impress us, Claire. We just want you to be realistic. This fantasy of being some big entrepreneur, it's getting old. Mom and Dad worry about your financial future. Maybe it's time to consider a real job with benefits and stability." I stared at her. This woman who shared my blood but seemed incapable of seeing me as anything but a cautionary tale. "My business is real, Victoria. Just because it doesn't look like Richard's career doesn't make it a fantasy." She sighed, the sound heavy with exasperation. "This is why it's so exhausting having you around. Everything becomes a debate, a defense of your choices. No one wants to walk on eggshells during a celebration." The words hit me like physical blows. "Is that how you see me? As exhausting?" Victoria shrugged, turning back to the dishwasher. "I'm just saying what everyone thinks. Your constant need to prove yourself, to be different. It's draining. Sometimes, we just want a normal family gathering without your intensity." I stood there, speechless, as the implication of her words sank in. Before I could respond, my mother entered the kitchen, carrying more dishes. "Everything all right in here?" she asked, glancing between us. "Fine," Victoria said smoothly. "I was just suggesting that Claire might want to consider looking at more stable career options." My mother set down the dishes and turned to me, with a familiar expression, concern tinged with disappointment. "Your sister has a point, honey. This business venture was a good experience, but perhaps it's time to think about something more secure. My business is secure, I replied, my voice tighter than I intended. We're growing every quarter. Of course you are, my mother said, in that placating tone she'd used throughout my childhood whenever I expressed ambitions she found unrealistic. But wouldn't it be nice not to have all that pressure? Victoria never has to worry about whether her mortgage will be paid. Because Victoria married money, I said before I could stop myself. The kitchen went silent. Victoria's face flushed with anger. That's not fair, my mother said quietly. Your sister has worked very hard to build her life. And I haven't? I challenged, the accumulated frustrations of years breaking through my carefully maintained composure. Do you have any idea what it takes to start a business from nothing? To find clients, manage projects, handle finances, all without a safety net? No one said you haven't worked hard, my mother replied. We're just concerned about your future. No, I corrected her, a strange calm settling over me. You're concerned that my future doesn't look like what you envisioned. You're concerned that I didn't follow Victoria's path. You're concerned that I'm not meeting your definition of success. Victoria slammed a cabinet door. This is exactly what I meant. No one wants your defensive speeches, Claire. No one wants your justifications for why you're still struggling while the rest of us have figured it out. She looked directly at me, her expression cold. The truth is, no one wants you here if all you're going to do is make everything about your choices and your struggles. I waited for my mother to object, to say something in my defense. Instead, she looked down and nodded slightly, a silent endorsement of Victoria's assessment. The kitchen seemed to shrink around me, the air suddenly thick and difficult to breathe. In that moment, something fundamental shifted inside me. The need for their approval, their understanding, their validation. It didn't disappear, but it receded, replaced by something stronger. The absolute certainty that I deserved better than this. I see, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. Thank you for the clarity. I walked out of the kitchen, found Ella to say a quiet goodbye, and left without another word to Victoria or my mother. As I drove away from my sister's perfect house, I felt an equal measure of pain and liberation. They had finally said aloud what I had sensed for years. I didn't fit into their vision of family, of success, of acceptability. But instead of crushing me, the realization strengthened my resolve. If I didn't belong in their world, I would build my own. If they couldn't see my value, I would create success so undeniable that even they would have to acknowledge it. Not for their approval. I was finally ready to let go of that pursuit, but for my own vindication. By the time I reached my apartment, the pain had crystallized into determination. I opened my laptop and began working on the business plan I'd been considering for weeks, an expansion that felt risky but had tremendous potential. If no one in my family wanted me there, fine. I would go where I was wanted, into the future I was creating for myself, on my own terms. What I didn't realize then was that this painful rejection would become the catalyst for transforming not just my business, but my entire life. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The following Monday, I arrived at my office earlier than usual. The modest space I rented in a converted warehouse building felt different somehow. No longer a stepping stone, but a foundation. The exposed brick walls and industrial windows that had once seemed charming but temporary now represented something else. A place entirely mine, built on my own terms. My team wouldn't arrive for another hour, giving me time to process the weekend's events and channel my emotions into productive action. I opened my laptop and reviewed the expansion plan I'd worked on late into the night after leaving Victoria's house. In the harsh light of morning, the strategy still held up. Ambitious, but achievable if I was willing to take calculated risks. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "We need to talk about yesterday. Call me when you can." I set the phone face down on my desk without responding. Any conversation now would only cycle through familiar patterns. Her gentle admonishments about my sensitivity, subtle suggestions that I should apologize for disrupting Ella's celebration, and inevitable comparisons to Victoria's more agreeable nature. I needed distance from that dynamic to focus on what mattered now. By the time my team arrived, Zoe, my first hire and now creative director, Marcus, our client relations manager, and twin brothers Devin and Dallas, our design specialists. I had mapped out a 6-month growth strategy that would require all of us to stretch beyond our comfort zones. "Good weekend?" Zoe asked, settling at her desk across from mine. "Illuminating," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. "Actually, I need to talk to everyone this morning. I've been thinking about our direction." An hour later, I had laid out my vision, expanding beyond our regional focus to pursue national clients, investing in advanced analytics capabilities, and possibly bringing on 2 new team members. It would require longer hours initially and reinvesting most of our profits, but the potential returns were substantial. "This is ambitious," Marcus said carefully. Always the pragmatist, he was already calculating the risks. We'd be competing against established agencies with more resources. "True," I acknowledged, "but we have something they don't: agility and personalized attention. We're not trying to be them, we're offering an alternative." Devin looked excited, already sketching concepts on his tablet. "We've been turning down interesting projects because they didn't fit our current model. This opens up possibilities." "It also increases our workload significantly," Zoe pointed out. "We're already maxed out most weeks." I nodded, appreciating their candid responses. I know I'm asking a lot. If anyone feels this isn't the right direction for them, I understand. But I believe we're capable of more than we've allowed ourselves to pursue. By the end of the discussion, the initial wariness had transformed into cautious enthusiasm. We weren't naive about the challenges ahead, but there was a collective energy that hadn't been present before, a sense of purpose beyond meeting the next deadline. As my team dispersed to their respective tasks, Marcus lingered behind. "What really happened this weekend?" he asked quietly. Having worked closely together for 2 years, he had developed an annoying ability to detect when personal issues were driving my professional decisions. I considered deflecting but opted for a simplified truth. Family reminded me why I started this business in the first place, to build something meaningful on my own terms. He studied me for a moment before nodding. "Just make sure we're expanding for the right reasons. Growing to prove something to others rarely leads to sustainable success." His words stayed with me throughout the day, prompting an uncomfortable question. Was I accelerating our growth primarily to prove my family wrong? Was this about business strategy or personal vindication? That evening, after everyone had left, I confronted this question honestly. There was undeniably an emotional component to my sudden urgency, the need to transform rejection into fuel. But beneath that reactive layer was something more substantial: genuine belief in our capabilities and a vision for what we could become if we stopped playing small. My phone displayed 3 missed calls from my mother and 1 from Victoria. I wasn't ready to engage with them yet, not until I had secured enough emotional distance to prevent falling back into established patterns. Instead, I called the one family member who had consistently supported my independent streak, my grandfather William, who had built his own construction business decades earlier. "About time you called," his gruff voice answered. "Your mother's been bending my ear about some blow-up at Ella's party." "I'm sure she has," I replied, unable to suppress a smile despite everything. At 84, Grandpa Will remained refreshingly direct. "Let me guess. She didn't mention telling me to Give up my business? Something about you being overly sensitive and Victoria just trying to help, he confirmed. Load of nonsense if you ask me. How's that company of yours doing? For the next half hour, I shared both my business expansion plans and an honest account of what had transpired at the party. Unlike the rest of my family, Grandpa Will listened without immediately offering judgments or solutions. Your mother and sister, he said finally. They value certainty over possibility. Always have. It's why they can't understand what you're building. The outcome isn't guaranteed. His assessment was simple but profound. Victoria's path, college, marriage, motherhood, had followed a clear, socially approved trajectory with predictable rewards. My journey involved consistent uncertainty, the possibility of failure, and rewards that weren't always visible or immediate. The hardest part of building something, Grandpa Will continued, isn't the work itself. It's tolerating the doubt, from others and from yourself. Most people will choose security over potential any day. That doesn't make them wrong, just different from folks like you and me. So what do I do about them? I asked, the question that had been circling in my mind since I'd walked out of Victoria's kitchen. About your family? Nothing for now, he said. Focus on your business. Build something you're proud of, not to prove them wrong, but because it's what you're meant to do. The rest will sort itself out in time. They don't believe in me, Grandpa. Doesn't matter, he replied firmly. Do you believe in yourself? Because that's the only opinion that counts in the end. After our call, I felt more centered than I had since the party. Grandpa Will had given me permission to prioritize my vision over my family's approval, something I had intellectually understood but emotionally struggled with my entire life. The next morning, I finally texted my mother, "Need some time to focus on work. I'll reach out when I'm ready to talk." Then I silenced notifications from both her and Victoria, creating the space I needed to channel my energy into productive action. The following weeks passed in a blur of strategic planning, client meetings, and late nights. I poured myself into expanding our business, not out of spite, but with genuine conviction about what we could achieve. The rejection I'd experienced became less about my family's words and more about the opportunity they had, inadvertently created, pushing me to fully commit to my path without the safety net of their approval. We landed our first national client in August, a mid-sized tech company looking to refresh their brand identity. The project fee was larger than anything we'd previously handled, allowing us to bring on a digital marketing specialist and invest in the analytics software we needed for the next phase of growth. September brought another significant client, followed by 2 more in October. By November, we had outgrown our original office space and were preparing to move to larger quarters. After the new year, our team had expanded to 9 people, each bringing unique skills that strengthened our offerings. Through it all, I maintained minimal contact with my family. Periodic texts with my mother, a birthday card for my father, regular calls with Grandpa, Will, and occasional messages to Ella, who had started her freshman year at college. Victoria and I didn't communicate at all, a silence that was initially painful but gradually became liberating. Christmas approached, bringing the inevitable question of holiday plans. My mother called one evening as I was reviewing quarterly projections. "We want you to come for Christmas dinner," she said, her tone carefully neutral. "Your father misses you." I closed my laptop, giving the conversation my full attention. "I'm not sure that's a good idea, Mom. Nothing has been resolved between Victoria and me." "It's Christmas," she replied, as if the holiday itself should erase months of estrangement. "Family should be together. The last time I was with family, I was told no one wanted me there," I reminded her. "Have things changed since then?" She sighed, the sound familiar and weary. Victoria was upset. She said things she didn't mean. "And you?" I asked quietly. "You agreed with her." "I did not," she protested, though we both knew otherwise. I was just trying to keep the peace. The old pattern reasserted itself. Victoria's behavior excused, my reactions problematized, my mother positioning herself as the neutral peacekeeper rather than acknowledging her role. "Mom," I said carefully, "I've spent months building something important to me without family support. I'm not ready to pretend everything's fine for the sake of a Christmas photo." "So you're punishing us," she concluded, falling back on a familiar characterization of my boundaries as vindictive rather than protective. "I'm prioritizing my well-being," I corrected her. "I'll see Dad separately. Maybe lunch next week." After we hung up, I felt a complex mixture of emotions. Guilt for disappointing her, pride for maintaining my boundary, sadness for the relationship we might have had under different circumstances. But beneath these feelings was a newfound steadiness, a confidence in my choices that hadn't existed before. The business continued to flourish through the winter and into spring. We moved into our new office in January, a space 3 times larger than our original location, with a conference room that actually fit our entire team. By March, we had hired 2 more specialists and were consistently winning projects against much larger agencies. One evening in April, as I was preparing to leave the office, Zoe stopped by my desk. "Have you seen this?" she asked, sliding a business magazine across my desk, open to a feature on regional entrepreneurs. There, in glossy print, was a profile of me and the agency, highlighting our rapid growth and innovative approach to client relationships. The photo showed me standing in our new office, the team visible in the background, a visual representation of everything we'd built over the past year. "They're calling us one of the fastest-growing agencies in the region," Zoe said, grinning. "Pretty good for a little business, wouldn't you say?" I stared at the article, remembering my mother's dismissive words at Ella's graduation party. A little business. Now that business employed 11 people, served clients across the country, and had just been recognized in a prominent publication. The irony wasn't lost on me. "We should celebrate," Marcus suggested, joining us with Devin and Dallas. "This kind of recognition will bring in even more opportunities." As we gathered for impromptu champagne in the conference room, I felt a profound sense of validation. Not because my family would finally see my success, but because I no longer needed them to. The approval I had sought for so long had been replaced by something far more valuable. The satisfaction of building something meaningful, surrounded by people who genuinely appreciated the vision. What I didn't know then was that the magazine article would find its way to Victoria's coffee table, setting in motion a reunion I wasn't yet prepared for. One that would force me to confront not just my family's changed perception of me, but my own transformed understanding of success. The magazine feature changed everything, though not immediately. Its effects rippled outward slowly, first bringing new client inquiries, then industry recognition, and finally, inevitably, reaching my family. I was in the middle of a strategy session with a potential client when Marcus knocked on the conference room door, apologizing for the interruption. "Your sister is in the lobby," he said quietly. "She says she won't leave until she speaks with you." The room seemed to tilt slightly. "Victoria here, in my professional space?" I excused myself from the meeting, promising to return shortly, and made my way to the reception area with a strange sense of detachment, as if watching myself move through a scenario I'd imagined but never expected to actually face. Victoria stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, examining our awards wall. She wore a tailored charcoal suit, Victoria the corporate lawyer, not Victoria the suburban mother. When she turned to face me, her expression was unreadable. "Your office is impressive," she said, her tone carefully neutral. "Thank you," I replied, maintaining equal neutrality. "This is unexpected." Victoria glanced around, noting the modern furnishings, the glass-walled offices where my team worked. "I saw the magazine article. Dad showed it to me." "Of course. My father, the quiet mediator, would have ensured Victoria saw tangible evidence of my success, hoping it might bridge the gap between us. "We can talk in my office," I said, gesturing toward a door at the end of the hallway. I didn't want this conversation, whatever it might entail, to unfold in view of my entire team. My office was the one space in our new location I'd taken time to personalize. Unlike the minimalist design of the common areas, here I'd chosen warm colors, comfortable furniture, and walls lined with framed photographs of meaningful projects and team celebrations. It was a room that reflected both professional accomplishment and personal values, exactly what I'd been building over the past year. Victoria settled into a chair across from my desk, her posture rigid. "You've done well for yourself," she said, gesturing vaguely at our surroundings. "We've worked hard," I corrected gently, emphasizing the collaborative nature of our success. "Right." She nodded, a hint of her old condescension breaking through. "Your team. Very inspirational." I didn't take the bait. "What brings you here, Victoria? It's been nearly a year since we've spoken." She straightened imperceptibly, as if preparing for a difficult negotiation. "Mom's birthday is next weekend. She wants you there." "And you're her messenger?" "I volunteered," she replied, surprising me. "I thought you might be more likely to consider it if I asked in person." I studied my sister, this woman I'd grown up with yet never truly understood. Was this an olive branch or merely family obligation? Her expression revealed nothing. "Why now?" I asked. "What's changed since Ella's graduation?" Victoria sighed, some of her rigid composure dissolving. "You have, apparently, the business, the magazine feature. Dad won't stop talking about it." And there it was. The truth I hadn't wanted to acknowledge. My family's renewed interest coincided precisely with external validation of my success. Not when I was struggling to build something from nothing. Not during the months of 80-hour work weeks and financial uncertainty. Only now, when industry recognition made my achievements impossible to dismiss. "So I'm welcome back now that I've proven myself?" The words emerged sharper than I'd intended. Victoria had the grace to look uncomfortable. "That's not fair." "Isn't it?" I leaned forward, the accumulated hurt of years finding its voice. "You told me no one wanted me there." Mom agreed. "Now that my little business has been featured in a magazine, suddenly I'm invited to family gatherings." "You're twisting things," Victoria protested, but without her usual confidence. "I said things I shouldn't have, yes. I was frustrated. You always had to be different, to challenge everything, to make everything so difficult." "Being authentic isn't the same as being difficult," I replied. "I chose a different path than you did. That doesn't make it less valid." Victoria was silent for a moment, looking around my office with new attention. Her gaze lingered on a photograph of my team celebrating our first national client win. "You really built all this yourself, didn't you?" The question seemed genuine, without the skepticism or condescension I'd grown accustomed to. For the first time, Victoria was seeing me, not as her annoying younger sister who couldn't conform, but as someone who had created something substantial through vision and perseverance. "With my team," I corrected again. "But yes, this is what I've been trying to explain to you and Mom for years. This is what I wanted to build, even when it seemed impractical or risky." Victoria nodded slowly. "I didn't get it," she admitted. "The uncertainty, the lack of structure, it seemed irresponsible. Because it didn't follow your playbook." "Because it scared me," she said quietly. The admission hung between us, unexpected and strangely vulnerable. "Watching you risk everything for something that might never succeed. It was like watching someone walk across a tightrope without a net. I couldn't understand why anyone would choose that." Her honesty caught me off guard. In all our years of conflict, Victoria had never acknowledged fear as the underlying emotion behind her judgment. She had always presented her choices, the traditional career, the stable marriage, the prescribed life milestones, as objectively superior, not as personally necessary for her own sense of security. Risk looks different depending on where you're standing, I said after a moment. For me, the greater risk would have been not trying, never knowing what might have been possible. Victoria seemed to consider this, turning the concept over in her mind. Mom doesn't understand that, she said finally. She never will. Security is everything to her, emotional, financial, social. Your choices felt like a rejection of everything she values. I wasn't rejecting her values. I was honoring my own. I know that now, Victoria conceded. Seeing all this, she gestured around the office, makes it clear that you weren't just being stubborn or rebellious. You were building something that mattered to you. The acknowledgement, however belated, felt significant, not because I still needed her approval, but because it represented a shift in how she perceived me, from problematic family member to successful professional in my own right. So what happens now? I asked. We pretend the last year never happened? Act like one family dinner can erase everything that was said? Victoria shook her head. I'm not suggesting we pretend anything. What happened at Ella's party was real. The things I said, they were cruel, but they were honest in that moment. I really didn't understand your choices then. And Mom? I pressed. Has her perspective changed, or does she just want a harmonious birthday because it looks better? To have the whole family there. Victoria hesitated, confirming my suspicion. She's trying, she offered finally. In her way. She's kept every article about your company, you know. The local business journal piece, the industry newsletter mention, now the magazine feature. She has a folder. The image was so unexpected. My mother collecting evidence of the success she had dismissed as impossible, that I didn't immediately know how to respond. There was something both touching and troubling about it, as if my worth had to be externally validated before she could recognize it. That doesn't undo what happened, I said finally. No, Victoria agreed. It doesn't. But it might be a place to start. I looked at my sister, really looked at her, and saw something I hadn't noticed before. Beneath the polished exterior and practiced confidence was uncertainty, perhaps even regret. Victoria had always seemed so sure of herself, so convinced of her rightness, that I had never considered she might harbor doubts about the very certainties she had used to judge me. I need to think about it, I said honestly. Mom's birthday isn't just about her, it's about what kind of relationship we're all willing to build going forward. I'm not interested in conditional acceptance based on my financial success. Victoria nodded. That's fair. She stood to leave, then paused. For what it's worth, I am sorry. Not just because you proved me wrong, but because I should have supported you regardless of whether your business succeeded or failed. The apology was unexpected and imperfect, still framing my choices in terms of their outcomes rather than their inherent value. But it was sincere. As Victoria left, I remained in my office, processing the conversation and its implications for the family dynamics that had shaped so much of my life. Later that evening, after my team had gone home, I called Grandpa Will. His perspective had guided me through the past year, and I needed his wisdom now more than ever. So Victoria came crawling back, he summarized after I recounted the visit. Now that you're in magazines, suddenly they're interested in having you around. That's what it feels like, I admitted. But she did apologize in her way. His skepticism was audible. The question isn't whether she's sorry, it's whether anything has fundamentally changed. Will they respect your choices even if the business hits hard times? Will they value your perspective even when it contradicts theirs? These were the essential questions, cutting through surface appearances to the core issues. The past year of separation from my family had been painful but clarifying. I had built a life aligned with my values, surrounded by people who respected my vision. Reintroducing family dynamics that had consistently undermined my confidence and questioned my judgment could threaten that hard-won equilibrium. "What would you do?" I asked him. "Doesn't matter what I'd do," he replied. "But I'll tell you this. Forgiveness isn't the same as forgetting. You can choose to re-establish a relationship without pretending the hurt never happened. You can set terms for how you're willing to be treated going forward." His words resonated deeply. The choice wasn't binary, complete estrangement or total reconciliation. There was a middle path where I could cautiously rebuild connections while maintaining the boundaries necessary for my well-being. "They'll test those boundaries," Grandpa Will warned, as if reading my thoughts. "Not maliciously, maybe, but out of habit. Old patterns die hard." "I know," I acknowledged. "But I'm stronger now. I've proven to myself what I'm capable of, even without their support or approval." "That's the real victory," he said quietly. "Not the magazine feature or the fancy office. The fact that you know your own worth now, regardless of whether they recognize it." After our call, I sat in my darkened apartment, considering the choices before me. The hurt inflicted at Ella's graduation party hadn't disappeared, but neither had the lifetime of shared history that preceded it. My mother's birthday presented an opportunity, not to erase the past, but to potentially begin writing a different future. I pulled out my phone and composed a text to Victoria. "Still thinking about Mom's birthday. If I come, we need to have an honest conversation first, all of us. No pretending, no dismissing what happened. Real acknowledgement and commitment to change." Her response came quickly. "I'll make it happen. Thank you for considering it." As I set down my phone, I realized that the choice to re-engage with my family wasn't about forgiveness or vindication. It was about determining whether relationships that had once diminished me could evolve into connections that honored the person I had become, successful not just by external metrics, but by the standard that mattered most: building a life authentic to my own values and vision. What I couldn't have anticipated was how this tentative reconciliation would be tested by an unexpected crisis, one that would reveal whether my family's renewed interest was truly about reconnection or merely a response to my newfound success. 3 days before my mother's birthday, I found myself sitting in the sunroom of my parents' house, surrounded by the people who had both shaped and wounded me. The afternoon light filtered through sheer curtains, casting gentle shadows across familiar furniture. Nothing had changed in this space since I'd last visited. The same floral upholstery, the same carefully arranged family photos, the same sense of ordered domesticity my mother had always prized. Yet everything had changed, including me. My father sat beside my mother on the love seat, his hand occasionally patting hers in a gesture of reassurance. Victoria perched on an armchair across from me, her posture perfect but her fingers fidgeting with her watch strap, a rare tell of nervousness. Grandpa Will had insisted on attending as well, positioning his wheelchair slightly behind my chair like a silent guardian. "I appreciate everyone agreeing to this conversation," I began, my voice steadier than I had expected. "Before we discuss Mom's birthday celebration, we need to address what happened last year and what needs to change going forward." My mother shifted uncomfortably. "Claire, perhaps we could focus on moving forward rather than dwelling on—" "That's exactly what we're not going to do," I interrupted gently but firmly. "Pretending problems don't exist doesn't solve them. It just guarantees they'll resurface later." My father cleared his throat. "Your mother and I want to repair our relationship with you. We've missed you this past year." "I've missed aspects of our relationship too," I acknowledged, "but I haven't missed feeling judged, Dismissed? Or devalued because my choices are different from what you expected? Victoria looked up from her watch. I've already apologized for what I said at Ella's party. You have, I agreed. And I appreciate that. But this isn't just about one incident or one hurtful comment. It's about a pattern that's existed for as long as I can remember, where my decisions are questioned, my ambitions are treated as unrealistic, and my success is measured against standards that aren't my own. The room fell silent. My mother glanced at my father, a familiar wordless communication passing between them. We've always wanted what's best for you, my mother finally said, her voice small. We worried about your security, your future. I understand that, I replied. But there's a difference between concern and control, between offering guidance and imposing expectations. When you dismissed my business as a little venture that would never provide stability, that wasn't concern. It was judgment based on a limited definition of success. My father leaned forward. Your business has clearly thrived, Claire. We couldn't be prouder of what you've accomplished. His words, though well-intentioned, highlighted the core issue. That's part of the problem, Dad. Would you be proud if the business had remained small but fulfilled me? Would you be proud if I'd chosen a completely different path that made me happy, but didn't result in magazine features and financial success? He blinked, genuinely confused by the question. But you did succeed. Why talk about hypotheticals? Grandpa Will chuckled behind me, a dry sound without humor. And there it is. The success justifies the journey, regardless of how you treated her along the way. My mother bristled. That's not fair, Dad. We supported Claire through college, through her career changes, through everything. Financial support isn't the same as emotional support, I pointed out. You helped pay for my education, yes. But you questioned every decision that didn't align with your vision for my life. You compared me to Victoria constantly. You treated my independence as rebellion rather than self-determination. Victoria surprised me by nodding slowly. She's right, Mom. We all did that. Me, especially. My mother's eyes widened at this unexpected alliance. I never meant to make you feel... She trailed off, unable to complete the thought. Less than, I suggested. Inadequate? Like the family disappointment? Tears welled in her eyes. You were always so different, Claire. So determined to do things your own way. I didn't know how to guide someone who rejected every conventional path to security. For the first time, I saw my mother's behavior through a different lens, not as deliberate undermining, but as the panic of someone who equated conventionality with safety, who couldn't comprehend choosing uncertainty, even for the sake of authenticity. I wasn't rejecting security, I explained gently. I was pursuing a different kind of success, one defined by creating something meaningful, by building according to my own blueprint, rather than following someone else's. But the risks, my mother protested weakly, were mine to take, I finished, for her. That's what you need to understand if we're going to move forward. My choices are mine. They may not be the choices you would make. They may involve risks you wouldn't take. But they deserve respect, not constant questioning or dismissal. My father nodded slowly, his expression thoughtful. I think we understand that now, Claire. Seeing what you've built, it's made us reconsider some assumptions. That's the other thing we need to discuss, I said, addressing the uncomfortable truth at the heart of our reunion. My worth as a daughter, as a family member, can't be contingent on external success. I'm glad you're proud of my accomplishments, but what happens if the business faces challenges? If we lose clients or have to downsize? Will I be welcome at family gatherings then? Or will I go back to being the disappointing daughter who can't get her life together? The question hung in the air, exposing the conditional nature of the reconciliation they were offering. Success had earned me a place at the table again, but what truly needed to change was the metric by which my belonging was measured. "That's not fair," my mother protested, though her voice lacked conviction. "We love you regardless of your business." "Do you?" I challenged gently. Victoria made it very clear that no one wants me here when I was still building, still struggling. The invitation back into the fold came only after public recognition validated my choices. Victoria looked genuinely uncomfortable. "I can't deny that the magazine article changed my perspective," she admitted. "Seeing your work acknowledged that way made me realize I'd been wrong about what you were building. But," she added, meeting my gaze directly, "it also made me recognize something about myself. How limited my understanding of success has been. How frightened I've been of anything that doesn't fit neatly into conventional achievement." Her candor surprised me. Victoria had always presented her life choices as objectively superior, not as responses to her own fears and limitations. "The past year has been enlightening for all of us," my father said carefully. "Your absence forced us to examine why our family dynamic worked the way it did, why we couldn't seem to celebrate your path the way we celebrated Victoria's." Grandpa Will snorted. "About time." My mother shot him an exasperated look before turning back to me. "We made mistakes, Claire. Serious ones. We measured you against standards that didn't allow for who you actually are. I can't promise I'll always understand your choices, but I can promise to try harder to respect them, regardless of their outcomes." It was the most honest acknowledgement she had ever offered. Not a full understanding, but a commitment to reaching toward one. I felt something tight in my chest begin to loosen, not completely but enough to create space for possibility. "That's what I need," I said simply. "Not perfect understanding, not unwavering support for every decision, but basic respect for my agency and my right to define success on my own terms." My father reached for my hand. "We can do that, Claire. We want to do that." Victoria nodded in agreement. "I've spent the past year watching Richard struggle with Ella's decision to switch from pre-med to art history. It made me think about how I responded to your unconventional choices. How much energy we waste trying to control outcomes instead of supporting growth." The conversation continued for nearly 2 hours, moving from past hurts to future intentions. We established boundaries and expectations for rebuilding our relationships, not instantly or completely, but gradually and with conscious attention to the patterns that had damaged trust. By the time we finished, the afternoon light had shifted to early evening. My mother rose, looking emotionally drained, but somehow lighter. "Will you come to my birthday dinner on Saturday?" she asked quietly. "Yes," I replied. "As we agreed. No pretense, no pressure, just an honest attempt at a new beginning." She nodded, relief evident in her expression. As everyone prepared to leave, Grandpa Will signaled for me to wheel him onto the front porch. Once we were alone, he looked up at me with a mixture of pride and concern. "You handled that well," he said, his weathered hands resting on the arms of his wheelchair. "But remember what I said about old patterns. They'll slip back into familiar dynamics without even realizing it. Stay vigilant." "I will," I promised. "I'm not the same person who left here a year ago. I know my worth now, with or without their validation." He nodded approvingly. "That's my girl. Success isn't what you've built out there." He gestured vaguely toward the city where my office stood. "It's what you've built in here," he tapped his chest. "The courage to live authentically, even when it costs you something." As I drove home that evening, I reflected on how completely my life had transformed in a single year. From the painful rejection at Ella's graduation to the tentative reconciliation in my parents' sunroom, the journey had been less about proving my family wrong and more about proving myself right, about the possibilities that open when you honor your own vision despite others' doubts. The true test would come 2 weeks later, when an unexpected crisis threatened everything I had built. The economic downturn that had been lurking on the horizon suddenly accelerated, sending shockwaves through industries nationwide. Two of our largest clients froze their marketing budgets indefinitely, while a third canceled their contract outright, citing internal restructuring. Within a single week, we lost nearly 40% of our projected annual revenue. The expansion plans we'd been developing had to be immediately shelved. Worse, if we couldn't secure new clients quickly, we faced the possibility of layoffs, dismantling the exceptional team we'd so carefully assembled. As I sat in my office late one evening, reviewing contingency plans and budget projections, my phone rang. It was my mother. "Your father and I just heard about the economic situation," she said without preamble. "We're worried about how it might affect your business." My stomach tightened. Here it was, the test Grandpa Will had warned about. Would my family's renewed respect disappear at the first sign of struggle? Would they view this setback as confirmation of their original doubts about my path? "It's challenging," I admitted, deciding to be forthright rather than defensive. "We've lost some significant contracts. We're having to recalibrate our plans." A pause, then, "What can we do to help?" The question was so unexpected that for a moment I couldn't respond. No suggestions to find a real job with more security. No reminders about the risks I had chosen to take. Just a simple offer of support. "Actually," I said carefully, "Dad's connections in the manufacturing sector might be valuable right now. We're pivoting to focus on industries less impacted by the downturn, and his insight could help us identify potential clients." "I'll have him call you tomorrow," she promised. "And Claire? This doesn't change anything. Not for us, not anymore. Whether your business is featured in magazines or facing challenges, you're still building something brave and true to yourself. We see that now, those words, more than the magazine feature, more than the impressive office, more than the financial success, represented the real victory. Not external validation of my choices, but the recognition that their value transcended their outcomes. The road ahead would be difficult. The economic challenges were real, requiring difficult decisions and strategic pivots. But I would face them with both the confidence built through past success and the wisdom gained through adversity. More importantly, I would face them knowing that my worth, as an entrepreneur, as a daughter, as a human being, was not contingent on perpetual triumph, but rooted in the courage to pursue an authentic path, regardless of where it led. As I hung up the phone, I realized that the true richness I had gained over the past year wasn't financial at all. It was the wealth of self-knowledge, of purpose aligned with passion, of relationships based on genuine acceptance rather than conditional approval. That wealth would sustain me through whatever challenges lay ahead, a foundation more secure than any conventional path could have provided. The journey from rejection to reconciliation had transformed not just my circumstances, but my fundamental understanding of success, not as a destination to be reached or a status to be achieved, but as the daily choice to live in alignment with my deepest values, regardless of external judgment or approval. The economic downturn hit harder than anyone anticipated. By the end of the month, our client roster had shrunk by nearly half, and our projections showed a troubling trajectory. I called an all-hands meeting on a rainy Tuesday morning, gathering my team in our now too-large conference room. "I won't sugarcoat this," I began, looking at the concerned faces around the table. "We're facing the most significant challenge since we started, but I believe in our ability to adapt and emerge stronger." I laid out the situation transparently, our financial position, the market conditions, and the difficult decisions ahead. No false reassurances, no toxic positivity, just honest assessment and a commitment to finding a path forward together. "Are layoffs inevitable?" Marcus asked the question everyone was thinking. "They're a possibility I want to avoid at all costs," I replied honestly, but I need everyone's help developing alternatives. What followed was one of the most remarkable brainstorming sessions of my career. Rather than retreating into fear or self-preservation, the team engaged collectively, proposing cost-cutting measures, identifying potential growth areas despite the downturn, and suggesting creative approaches to retaining our remaining clients. Zoe suggested temporary salary reductions for senior staff, including herself, to preserve junior positions. The design twins, Devin and Dallas, proposed developing a subscription-based design service that could generate recurring revenue to complement our project-based model. Marcus outlined industries that historically invested in marketing during downturns and began compiling research on potential targets. By the end of the meeting, we had the skeleton of a survival strategy, not just defensive cuts, but a proactive plan to pivot and adapt. As the team dispersed, energized despite the circumstances, I felt a renewed appreciation for what we had built beyond the bottom line. A culture of collective problem-solving, resilience, and mutual support. That evening, as promised, my father called. "Your mother mentioned you might need some connections in manufacturing," he said, his tone carrying none of the "I told you so" undertone I might have expected a year earlier. "We're pivoting towards sectors less impacted by the downturn," I explained. Manufacturing, especially essential products rather than luxury goods, tends to maintain marketing budgets even in challenging times. "Smart thinking," he acknowledged. "I played golf last weekend with Lawrence Chen. He runs Premier Products. They've been expanding their medical supplies division, and from what he mentioned, they're looking to increase market share while competitors are pulling back." Premier Products was exactly the type of stable company we needed to target. Large enough to have significant budgets, but not so massive that they'd be inaccessible to a firm our size. "Would you be willing to make an introduction?" I asked, the request feeling strangely vulnerable. Throughout my career, I had deliberately avoided leveraging family connections, determined to succeed entirely on my own merits. "I'll do better than that," my father replied. "Lawrence and his wife are coming to dinner next week. Why don't you join us? It's not a formal pitch, just an opportunity to connect." The invitation represented more than a potential business lead. It was my father offering support in the way he knew how, without attempting to take over or undermine my autonomy. Year ago, I might have refused on principle, viewing the assistance as confirmation that I couldn't succeed independently. Now, I recognized it as precisely what successful business owners do: leverage networks and relationships while maintaining ultimate responsibility for results. "I'd appreciate that," I said sincerely. "Thank you." My father's voice softened. "I'm proud of how you're handling this setback, Claire. Many entrepreneurs would panic or give up when faced with these kinds of challenges." His praise focused on my resilience rather than exclusively on my previous success, felt like a tangible sign of our evolving relationship. The dinner with Lawrence Chen proved productive beyond my expectations. Rather than forcing a business conversation, I focused on genuine connection, discovering shared interests in architectural preservation and distance running. By the end of the evening, he had suggested a meeting with his marketing director to discuss their upcoming product launches. This interaction became a template for our new approach: authentic relationship building rather than desperate pitching. I reached out to Grandpa Will's old construction contacts, attended industry events in sectors we hadn't previously targeted, and encouraged team members to activate their own networks. Gradually, new opportunities emerged. A medical device manufacturer needed help repositioning their brand for post-pandemic priorities. A sustainable packaging company wanted to highlight their environmental advantages to eco-conscious consumers. A family-owned food producer sought to modernize their image while honoring their heritage. None of these clients matched the size of those we'd lost, but collectively they created a foundation for rebuilding. More importantly, they represented a more diverse portfolio, reducing our vulnerability to sector-specific downturns in the future. The internal changes proved equally significant. We sublet half our office space to a compatible startup, immediately reducing our overhead while creating potential collaboration opportunities. Senior team members voluntarily reduced their salaries, temporarily, demonstrating a commitment to preserving jobs that strengthened our collective resolve. Most significantly, we launched a streamlined service package specifically designed for businesses navigating uncertainty, focused on essential brand maintenance rather than comprehensive campaigns, priced accessibly, and structured to evolve. As clients' situations improved, this offering emerged from necessity but revealed a previously unrecognized market niche. Many businesses needed strategic marketing support during the downturn, but couldn't commit to traditional agency engagements. Our flexible approach resonated particularly with mid-sized companies navigating similar challenges to our own. 3 months into the crisis, we reached a stabilization point. Not thriving yet, but no longer in imminent danger. We had preserved every job, though with reduced hours for some positions. We had maintained our core capabilities while developing new ones better suited to the changed economic landscape. One Friday afternoon, as the team gathered for our weekly check-in, Zoe raised her water bottle in an impromptu toast. "To Claire," she said, "who could have retreated into the CEO office during this storm, but instead invited us all into the navigation room." The sentiment caught me off guard, bringing unexpected emotion to the surface. "This was never about me weathering the crisis alone," I managed. "It's about the collective resilience we've built together." Marcus nodded thoughtfully. "You know, when we were featured in that magazine last year, they focused on our rapid growth and impressive client roster. Maybe the real story worth telling is this one: how we adapted when everything we'd built was threatened." His observation resonated deeply. The magazine feature had captured a moment of external success, but our response to adversity revealed something more meaningful about our organizational character and values. The growth had been impressive, but the resilience was transformative. That weekend, I drove to my parents' house for a casual family dinner, a new monthly tradition established. Since our reconciliation, Victoria and Richard would be there with their children, along with Grandpa Will and a few close friends. As I pulled into the driveway, I felt a lightness that had been absent from previous family gatherings. The prospect of spending an evening with my family no longer evoked anxiety about measuring up or defending my choices. The conditional approval that had characterized our relationships for so long had been replaced by something approaching genuine acceptance. Victoria greeted me at the door, her usual polished appearance slightly disheveled. "Fair warning," she whispered as she hugged me. "Richard's been stressed about work, the downturn's affecting his development projects." A year ago, this information would have been delivered differently, as evidence of the risks I had taken in choosing an entrepreneurial path, or as a reminder of Richard's important position in the commercial real estate world. Now, it was simply context about their current challenges, offered without judgment or comparison. Inside, Richard was uncharacteristically subdued, his typical confidence noticeably diminished. During dinner, he mentioned potential delays in the downtown project he'd been developing, the financing suddenly uncertain in the changing economic climate. "It's temporary," he assured everyone, though his expression betrayed deeper concern. "The fundamentals are strong. We just need to weather this adjustment period." I recognized the forced optimism in his voice, the same tone I had adopted during the early days of our company's crisis. The need to project confidence while privately grappling with serious doubts was familiar terrain. After dinner, as others moved to the living room for coffee, Richard lingered in the kitchen where I was helping my mother with dishes. "Victoria mentioned you've been navigating similar challenges with your agency," he said, attempting casual conversation but unable to mask his interest. "It's been a significant reset," I acknowledged. We've had to reimagine almost everything about our business model and approaches. Richard nodded, his expression shifting from polite interest to genuine engagement. How did you... I mean, what strategies have been most effective for you? The question contained no trace of the condescension that had characterized many of our previous interactions. This wasn't Richard, the successful brother-in-law, offering guidance to the struggling entrepreneur. This was simply someone facing business challenges, seeking perspective from someone who might understand. Transparency has been crucial, I offered. With our team, with clients, with ourselves. Acknowledging the reality rather than denying it created space for actual solutions. We talked for nearly an hour, moving from the kitchen to the back porch, discussing practical approaches to uncertainty, the psychological challenges of leading through crisis, and the unexpected opportunities that emerged from necessary adaptation. I shared our experiences openly, neither minimizing the difficulties nor exaggerating our progress. As our conversation wound down, Richard regarded me with newfound respect. You know, I always thought your business was more of a creative endeavor than a serious enterprise, he admitted. I was wrong. The way you've navigated this situation demonstrates real business acumen. Rather than feeling vindicated by his acknowledgement, I felt a strange compassion. Richard's narrow definition of serious enterprise had limited his understanding not just of my work, but potentially of his own. Success had come easily to him through traditional channels, perhaps denying him the growth that comes from navigating uncertainty and reinvention. Every business faces moments of reinvention, I told him. The ones that survive long-term are those willing to question their fundamental assumptions when circumstances demand it. As I drove home that night, I reflected on how profoundly relationships had shifted. A year earlier, family gatherings had been exercises in defending my choices and deflecting subtle criticism. Now, remarkably, I was the one offering guidance to Richard, the family's established business success story. The economic crisis that had threatened everything I'd built had paradoxically strengthened my position, not financially, at least not yet, but in terms of resilience, adaptability, and inner security. The magazine feature had earned me external validation, but navigating the downturn had provided something more valuable: genuine confidence in my capacity to face whatever challenges emerged. The following Monday brought unexpected news. Lawrence. Chen called personally rather than routing through his marketing department. Claire, I've been impressed with the initial concepts your team presented, he began. We'd like to move forward, but with an expanded scope. In addition to the medical division campaign, we want to discuss a comprehensive brand refresh across all product lines. The project he described would be the largest in our company's history, a 12-month engagement that would stabilize our finances and potentially create opportunities for rehiring at full capacity. That's significant, I replied, maintaining professional composure despite my excitement. May I ask what prompted the expanded vision? Frankly, your approach, Lawrence said. Most agencies we've spoken with are either ignoring economic realities or offering drastically scaled-back services. Your team acknowledged the challenges while still proposing strategic innovation. That's the partnership we need during uncertain times. After we concluded the call, I sat quietly for a moment, absorbing the significance of his feedback. The very constraints that had initially seemed like setbacks, the need to adapt our services, recalibrate our approaches, embrace rather than deny uncertainty, had become our competitive advantage. I gathered the team to share the news, watching their expressions shift from cautious optimism to genuine celebration as I outlined the scope of the Premier Products engagement. This wasn't just a financial lifeline. It was validation of our collective approach to the crisis. This doesn't solve everything, I cautioned, not wanting to create false security. We still need to maintain our diversification strategy and continue developing our streamlined service package for smaller clients. But it creates breathing room to execute our rebuilding plan from a position of greater stability. As the team dispersed, energized by the development, Zoe lingered behind. "You know what this means, don't you?" she asked with a knowing smile. "Beyond the obvious financial implications?" I replied. "It means the story isn't successful company faces setback," she said. "It's company transforms challenge into opportunity." That's a much more compelling narrative for potential clients, for the industry, and for ourselves. She was right. The arc of our story had shifted from simple success followed by struggle to something more nuanced and ultimately more meaningful. The capacity to maintain core values while adapting to changed circumstances, to find opportunity within constraint, to emerge not just intact, but evolved. That evening, I called Grandpa Will to share the premier product's development. After expressing genuine pleasure at the news, he offered the perspective that had guided me throughout the journey. "Remember, Claire, the real measure of what you've built isn't the size of the contracts or the profile of the clients. It's the integrity of the process, creating work that matters in a way that honors your values, regardless of external circumstances." His words crystallized what I had been gradually learning through both success and adversity. True wealth wasn't measured in magazine features or revenue milestones, but in the capacity to navigate life's inevitable fluctuations without compromising essential principles. The path ahead remained uncertain. The economic climate continued to present challenges, and the rebuilt business would differ from what we had initially envisioned. But that uncertainty no longer felt threatening. It had become simply the context within which we exercised our creativity, resilience, and commitment to meaningful work. The rejection I had experienced at Ella's graduation party, painful as it had been, had ultimately catalyzed not just professional success but personal liberation. In walking away from conditional acceptance, I had created space to develop unconditional self-respect. In building a business aligned with my values, I had attracted both clients and team members who shared those values. In navigating crisis, without abandoning core principles, I had demonstrated the sustainable power of authentic leadership. As I reviewed the Premier Products proposal one final time before sending it, I noticed a quote we had included on the cover page, words I had first heard from Grandpa Will and had since adopted as an unofficial company philosophy. "Success isn't about avoiding storms, it's about learning to dance in the rain." The coming months would bring their own challenges and triumphs. But whatever emerged, I would face it from a position of internal security that no external circumstance, rejection or acclaim, struggle or success, could fundamentally shake. That security, more than any financial achievement or professional recognition, represented true wealth. 6 months after securing the Premier Products contract, our agency had not only stabilized, but begun to thrive in ways I couldn't have anticipated during the economic downturn. The comprehensive brand refresh had expanded to include digital transformation initiatives across their entire product ecosystem, requiring us to develop new capabilities and bring on specialized talent. More significantly, our experience navigating uncertainty had become our most compelling selling point. Companies facing similar challenges sought partners who understood adaptation rather than merely growth. Our case studies now highlighted resilience alongside results, demonstrating how strategic pivots could create unexpected opportunities even in constraining circumstances. One Wednesday morning, as I reviewed quarterly projections with Marcus, my assistant interrupted with an unusual message. "There's a woman from Vantage Media in the lobby," she said. "Catherine Reynolds. She doesn't have an appointment, but says it's important." The name registered immediately. Catherine Reynolds was the founder and CEO of Vantage Media, one of the largest marketing conglomerates in the country. They owned dozens of agencies across multiple specialties, with offices in major cities worldwide. What could possibly bring her to our doorstep unannounced? "I'll meet her in the main conference room," I replied, exchanging a puzzled glance with Marcus. Catherine Reynolds was a striking figure, tall, impeccably dressed, with the confident bearing of someone accustomed to commanding attention. As I entered, she rose to greet me with a firm handshake and direct gaze. "Thank you for seeing me without notice," she began. "I prefer initial conversations without the formality of scheduled meetings. It reveals more about an organization's authentic culture." Her straightforwardness was refreshing, if somewhat intimidating. "I'm intrigued by the unorthodox approach," I admitted. "What brings you to our agency?" Catherine smiled slightly. "Two things: the Premier Products campaign and your team's response to the economic downturn. Both demonstrated something increasingly rare in our industry: adaptive intelligence combined with principled execution." She placed a folder on the conference table. "Vantage has been monitoring your work for the past year. Initially, we were impressed by your growth trajectory. But honestly, your response to adversity interested us more than your previous success. The revelation that we had been on Vantage's radar was surprising enough. That they valued our crisis management over our growth metrics was even more unexpected. I appreciate the recognition," I said carefully, "but I'm still not clear on your purpose today." Catherine nodded appreciatively at my directness. "Vantage is interested in acquiring your agency." The statement hung in the air, simultaneously flattering and unsettling. Acquisition by a major holding company represented validation of what we'd built, potentially securing our financial future and expanding our capabilities. It also threatened the independent culture and decision-making autonomy that had allowed us to navigate challenges so effectively. "I imagine you have questions and concerns," Catherine continued. "Let me outline our approach. Vantage doesn't absorb agencies into a homogeneous structure. We maintain their distinct identities and leadership while providing resources, infrastructure, and cross-network opportunities." She proceeded to describe financial terms that exceeded anything I might have imagined: an upfront payment that would create significant wealth for me and key team members, followed by earn-out incentives tied to continued growth. The offer represented security, expansion potential, and personal financial transformation in one comprehensive package. "Why now?" I asked when she finished. "Our valuation would have been higher before the downturn." "Precisely," Catherine replied. "Before the downturn, you were one of many growing independent agencies with impressive client rosters. Now you're something rarer, a team that has demonstrated resilience without sacrificing creativity or principles. Vantage can help accelerate growth in numerous agencies. Finding leadership that maintains integrity through adversity is much harder." Her assessment was perceptive and personally affirming. Still, the decision required careful consideration beyond flattering recognition. "I appreciate the offer and your clear articulation of Vantage's interest," I said. "This obviously requires thoughtful evaluation and discussion with my leadership team. How soon do you need a response?" "Take 2 weeks," Catherine suggested, standing to leave. "Evaluate the formal offer in the folder, consult with advisors, and consider what you want for the next chapter of your professional journey. My direct contact information is included." After she departed, I sat alone in the conference room, the folder unopened before me. The acquisition offer represented the culmination of everything I had worked toward: external validation, financial security, expanded opportunities. Yet something held me back from immediate enthusiasm. That evening, I drove to Grandpa Will's house, the folder tucked into my bag. Since our reconciliation, family dinners had become regular occurrences, but I occasionally sought Grandpa Will's counsel separately, valuing his perspective unfiltered by group dynamics. His modest home remained unchanged despite offers to help with renovations or upgrades. "At my age, familiarity matters more than fashion," he always insisted. I found him in his study, surrounded by books and memorabilia from his own entrepreneurial journey. "You look preoccupied," he observed as I settled into the chair across from him. Business challenge or family drama? Neither, actually, I replied, extracting the folder from my bag. Vantage Media wants to acquire the agency. His eyebrows rose slightly. Catherine Reynolds finally made her move, did she? You knew about this? I asked, surprised. Catherine and I serve on the Economic Development Board together, he explained. She mentioned admiring your agency's approach several months ago. I didn't say anything because it wasn't my place to influence the process. This revelation added another dimension to consider. What do you think of Vantage as an organization? I asked. They're better than most conglomerates, he replied thoughtfully. Catherine runs a tight ship, but she genuinely values the distinct cultures of the agencies they acquire. Whether that's the right direction for your company depends entirely on what you want for its future, and your own. I opened the folder, sharing the financial terms and operational structure Catherine had outlined. The numbers were substantial, representing life-changing wealth and expanded professional possibilities. Impressive offer, Grandpa Will acknowledged. But I notice you don't seem as excited as one might expect. His observation cut to the heart of my hesitation. I should be thrilled, I admitted. This represents external validation of everything we've built. Financial security beyond anything I imagined. Resources to expand in ways we couldn't independently. But, he prompted, but something feels incomplete about it, I said, struggling to articulate the nebulous concern. Like accepting the offer would be closing a chapter before I've finished writing it. Grandpa Will nodded, understanding dawning in his expression. You're wondering if you're considering this because it represents the ultimate proof to your family that you succeeded on your own terms. His insight struck with uncomfortable precision. Despite our reconciliation, despite the genuine progress in our relationships, part of me still craved that final, irrefutable evidence that my path had been valid, even superior to the conventional route my family had advocated. The acquisition would certainly silence any lingering doubts, I acknowledged. No one could question the legitimacy of my choices with this outcome. That's precisely why you need to be careful, Grandpa Will cautioned. Decisions made primarily to prove others wrong, or to prove yourself right in their eyes, rarely lead to genuine fulfillment. He leaned forward, his gaze intensifying. Ask yourself this. If your family had supported your choices from the beginning, if they had never questioned your path or compared you to Victoria, would you be excited about this acquisition? Does it align with your vision for the company you've built and the life you want to create? Or does it represent the endpoint of a narrative driven partly by the need for validation? These questions cut through external considerations to the core issue, whether the Vantage offer aligned with my authentic values or primarily satisfied the remnants of a validation-seeking pattern I had worked to overcome. I don't know, I admitted. The opportunity is objectively extraordinary, but I keep thinking about how we navigated the downturn, the collaborative problem-solving, the agility in decision-making, the freedom to prioritize team preservation over short-term profits. Would we maintain that independence within a larger structure, regardless of Catherine's assurances? Grandpa Will smiled slightly. Now you're asking the right questions. Not, how will this look to others? But, how does this serve what I truly value? Over the next 2 weeks, I engaged in extensive due diligence, consulting with attorneys and financial advisors about the terms, speaking confidentially with leaders of other agencies Vantage had acquired, and most importantly, deep conversations with my core team about their perspectives and aspirations. These discussions revealed complex considerations beyond simple acceptance or rejection. Zoe valued creative autonomy above all else and worried about potential constraints within a larger organization. Marcus saw tremendous opportunity in accessing Vantage's global infrastructure and client relationships. The design twins were simultaneously excited about expanded resources and concerned about potential corporate influence on our distinctive, aesthetic approach. Their varied perspectives reflected the multifaceted implications of the decision. There was no obvious right answer, only thoughtful evaluation of what we collectively valued most for the future. The night before my scheduled response to Catherine, I found myself unable to sleep, my mind cycling through potential scenarios. Around midnight, I drove to the office, seeking the environment where our journey had unfolded, from struggling startup to acquisition target in just a few transformative years. The office was eerily quiet, the usual creative energy replaced by stillness. I walked through the space, memories surfacing with each area. Late nights developing our first major pitch in the small conference room, celebrating our initial national client in the break area, the all-hands meeting during the economic crisis where collective problem-solving had revealed our true organizational character. In my office, I found photographs documenting our evolution, the original team of 5 in our warehouse space, the ribbon cutting at our expanded office, groups of smiling team members at project launches and holiday celebrations. These images told a story beyond growth metrics or client acquisitions, a narrative about creating a community united by shared values and creative purpose. I sat at my desk, opened my laptop, and began writing. Not a pros and cons list, but a reflection on what success truly meant to me at this stage of my journey. Not external validation or financial milestones, but the freedom to create on my own terms, to build an organization that reflected my values, to evolve without constraints imposed by quarterly profit expectations or corporate hierarchies. By dawn, I had clarity. The Vantage acquisition offered tremendous benefits, but accepting it now would mean surrendering leadership of our story before we had fully explored our independent potential. The economic crisis had not derailed our journey, but rather revealed new possibilities we were just beginning to develop. When I called Catherine Reynolds that morning, she answered immediately. "I've made my decision," I told her. "While I'm deeply honored by Vantage's interest and impressed by the organization you've built, the timing isn't right for us. We're still discovering what we can become independently." Rather than disappointment, Catherine's response reflected genuine understanding. "I suspected you might decide this way," she admitted. "The same independence that makes your agency valuable to us makes you reluctant to surrender it." She paused briefly. "This isn't a one-time opportunity, Claire. The door remains open for future discussions when the timing feels right. In the meantime, I'd like to explore potential collaboration opportunities that don't involve acquisition, perhaps joint ventures on projects that would benefit from our combined capabilities." Her suggestion offered a middle path, maintaining our independence while accessing some of Vantage's resources and relationships. It demonstrated respect for our decision rather than pressure to reconsider. Later that day, I gathered the team to share both the acquisition offer and my decision to decline it. Their reactions ranged from relief to curiosity about the potential collaboration Catherine had proposed. "I want to be transparent about my reasoning," I explained. "This wasn't about rejecting growth or partnership opportunities. It was about recognizing that our independent journey still has important chapters to unfold. The economic crisis didn't interrupt our story. It revealed aspects of our collective capability we're just beginning to understand and develop." As the discussion evolved into brainstorming about future directions and potential Vantage collaborations, I felt profound certainty in the decision. The acquisition would have represented an impressive outcome in conventional terms, particularly in proving my family's doubts unfounded. But it would have been an ending rather than an evolution, a period rather than a comma in our organizational narrative. That weekend at my parents' home, the family gathered for my father's birthday celebration. As we settled in the living room after dinner, my mother mentioned seeing Catherine Reynolds at a charity function. "She spoke very highly of you," my mother reported with evident pride. "Said you were one of the most impressive young entrepreneurs she'd encountered." A year earlier, this secondhand validation from a respected business figure would have meant everything to me. External confirmation of my legitimacy in terms my family would value. Now, while pleasant, it felt incidental to my own assessment of our journey and potential. Catherine made an acquisition offer, I shared casually, observing their reactions. Surprise flickered across my parents' faces, while Victoria's eyebrows rose slightly. That's extraordinary, my father remarked. Vantage acquisitions are typically quite lucrative. When will it be finalized? It won't, I replied simply. I declined the offer. The silence that followed was profound. My family exchanged glances, clearly struggling to comprehend refusing such an opportunity. You turned down Vantage Media? Victoria finally asked, genuine confusion in her voice. Why would you do that? The question wasn't accusatory, but reflected sincere inability to understand prioritizing independence over prestigious acquisition and financial security, the very values they had consistently advocated throughout my life. Because success isn't just about financial outcomes or external validation, I explained. It's about building something that reflects your authentic vision and values. Our independent journey still has important chapters to unfold. To my surprise, rather than argument or criticism, my explanation was met with thoughtful consideration. My father nodded slowly, something like respect deepening in his expression. My mother looked momentarily confused, but then reached for my hand, with unexpected warmth. Only Victoria spoke, her perspective revealing how profoundly our relationship had evolved. I couldn't have made that choice, she admitted candidly. I would have taken the security and prestige without hesitation. But I understand why you didn't. You've always seen possibilities others miss. Her acknowledgement, not just of my decision but of the fundamentally different values that informed it, represented the most meaningful validation. Not because it proved me right or her wrong, but because it demonstrated genuine recognition of my distinct approach to defining success. As the conversation shifted to other topics, I caught Grandpa Will watching me, quiet satisfaction in his sigh expression. He had witnessed my journey from rejection to success to something more valuable than either. The confidence to make choices aligned with my authentic values, regardless of external metrics or approval. The real wealth I had accumulated wasn't measured in acquisition offers or magazine features, but in the freedom to define success on my own terms, to build a life and business guided by internal purpose rather than external validation. That freedom, hard-won through both triumph and adversity, represented the true meaning of being rich. The next 3 months passed in a blur of focused determination. Living in Carlos's spare room wasn't ideal, but it provided exactly what I needed: stability, support, and space to rebuild. I set up a makeshift office in the corner, my laptop perched on a folding table I'd found at a thrift store. This humble setup became command central for what would become my reinvention. Each morning, I woke at 5 a.m., 2 hours before my warehouse shift started. These precious morning hours became sacred, time dedicated solely to my business. No distractions, no doubts, just pure, concentrated effort. The warehouse job covered my basic expenses, but every spare dollar went directly into my digital marketing consultancy. Carlos respected my space and focus, often leaving coffee by my door before heading to his own job as a mechanical engineer. We developed an unspoken routine. He provided the roof, I handled the groceries, and in the evenings we occasionally shared meals and ideas. Unlike my family, Carlos never questioned my vision or suggested more practical alternatives. His simple belief in my potential became a foundation I could build upon. "You know what your problem was back home?" Carlos asked one evening as we sat on his small balcony, the city lights blinking in the distance. "You were trying to grow in soil that wasn't meant for you." I looked up from my laptop, where I'd been finalizing a proposal for a potential client. What do you mean? Think about it, he continued, gesturing with his beer bottle. Some plants need acidic soil, others need alkaline. Some need full sun, others thrive in shade. It's not about the plant being defective, it's about the environment being wrong for that particular plant. His analogy struck a chord so deep I had to take a moment to compose myself. For years, I'd internalized the idea that something was fundamentally wrong with me, that my struggle to thrive in my family's environment was evidence of my inadequacy rather than simply a mismatch of values and vision. I guess I never thought about it that way, I admitted. I always assumed I was the problem. Carlos shook his head, his expression serious. Tyler, your family wasn't bad soil. They were just the wrong soil for who you are. Here, in your own space, with the right support, this is where you'll grow. That conversation marked a turning point in my mindset. I stopped seeing myself as a failure who needed to prove his worth and started recognizing myself as an entrepreneur who simply needed the right conditions to flourish. The shift was subtle but profound, from deficiency to difference, from inadequacy to incompatibility. 2 weeks later, I landed my first significant client, a local fitness center looking to expand their digital presence. The owner had been disappointed by previous marketing efforts and was willing to take a chance on my smaller, hungrier operation. The contract wasn't huge, but it was enough to demonstrate what I could deliver with the right opportunity. I threw myself into the project, leveraging every skill I'd developed during years of study and side projects. The results exceeded both my expectations and the clients'. Their social media engagement increased by 300% within the first month. Their lead generation tripled. Most importantly, they saw a measurable increase in membership sales directly attributable to the targeted campaigns I'd designed. How the hell did you pull this off? The owner asked when I walked him through the analytics. We've worked with established agencies that delivered half these results at twice the price. I treated your business like it was my own, I said simply. Those agencies have dozens of clients. You were my priority. That first success led to a referral, which led to another client, and then another. Within 2 months, I was generating enough income to reduce my warehouse hours to part-time. By the 4th month, I was able to leave the warehouse job entirely and focus solely on my growing consultancy. What surprised me most during this period wasn't the gradual financial improvement, but the emotional transformation. The further I moved from my family's influence, the more clearly I could see the patterns that had defined our relationship. Their constant criticism hadn't been about my capabilities, but about their own fears and limited vision. Their need to control my path wasn't malicious. It was the only way they knew to express concern. Understanding this didn't excuse their behavior, but it helped me release the anger that had been fueling me. I realized that success built on rage might be powerful in the short term, but it wasn't sustainable. True, lasting achievement needed to come from a place of purpose rather than pain. On the 6-month anniversary of my departure from my family home, I celebrated by moving into my own apartment. It wasn't luxurious, a 1-bedroom unit in a decent neighborhood, but it represented a milestone I had achieved entirely on my own terms. Carlos helped me move my few belongings, culminating in the ceremonial placement of my laptop on an actual desk in a dedicated home office. To new beginnings, he said, handing me a housewarming gift, a small potted plant. A little reminder about finding the right soil. That night, after Carlos left, I sat in my new space, surrounded by possibilities rather than limitations. For the first time in my adult life, every decision in my environment reflected my own choices. The furniture arrangement, the artwork on the walls, the books on the shelves, all expressions of my identity uncensored by family expectations. I opened my laptop and looked at my client list, which had grown to 7 regular accounts, each one a vote of confidence in my abilities. My business bank account now contained more money than I'd ever had at one time. Not wealth by any standard, but enough to provide security and the foundation for growth. Out of curiosity, I searched my sister's name online, finding pictures of her at social events, always immaculately dressed, always projecting success and confidence. But behind the polished exterior, I wondered if she was truly satisfied or merely conforming to the approved narrative our family had established generations ago. I closed the browser, deciding that comparing our paths served no purpose. My journey wasn't about proving my family wrong. It was about proving myself right. The distinction was crucial. One path led to bitterness, the other to freedom. The following morning, I received an email from a business contact I'd met at a networking event. She represented a regional association of small businesses and was looking for someone to speak at their quarterly meeting about digital marketing strategies for companies with limited budgets. "Your name keeps coming up in conversations with local business owners," she wrote. "They're impressed by your results-oriented approach and hands-on methodology. Would you be interested in sharing your expertise with our members?" The invitation caught me off guard. I had been so focused on building my client base that I hadn't considered positioning myself as an authority or thought leader. Public speaking had never been my strength. Perhaps another reason my family had doubted my potential in client-facing business. But the opportunity to establish myself within the local business community was too valuable to decline based on mere discomfort. I accepted the invitation, spending the next 3 weeks preparing a presentation that distilled my approach into actionable strategies these business owners could implement immediately. The night before the event, I practiced in front of Carlos, who had become my most trusted advisor and critic. "You're ready," he assured me after my final run-through. "Just remember, these people aren't looking for perfection. They're looking for honesty and practical solutions. You have both in abundance." The next day, standing before a room of 40 small business owners, I felt a momentary flash of panic. What if my family had been right? What if I wasn't cut out for this? What if I failed publicly and confirmed every doubt they'd ever expressed? Then I took a deep breath, looked around the room, and recognized something in these entrepreneurs' expressions. The same hunger for growth, the same willingness to defy conventional wisdom in pursuit of their vision, the same courage that had propelled me forward when it would have been easier to surrender to others' expectations. "Success isn't just about having the right strategy," I began, my voice growing stronger with each word. "It's about having the right mindset, believing in your vision even when no one else does, especially when no one else does." For the next hour, I shared not just marketing tactics, but the underlying philosophy that had guided my own unlikely journey from rejection to self-reliance. As I spoke, I realized I wasn't just teaching these business owners. I was articulating the principles I had discovered through my own transformation. When I finished, the room erupted in applause. People lined up to ask follow-up questions and exchange contact information. By the end of the day, I had 5 new client prospects and an invitation to speak at 2 additional business associations. Driving home, I felt a sense of alignment I'd never experienced before. The pieces of my identity, my skills, my values, my approach to challenges had coalesced into something coherent and compelling. I was no longer struggling to fit into someone else's definition of success. I had defined success on my own terms and was actively creating it. That night, I received a text message from a number I didn't recognize. "Saw your presentation today. Impressive. Let's talk about potential collaboration. Marcus Reynolds, CEO, Elevate Media Group." I stared at the message in disbelief. Elevate Media Group was one of the largest marketing firms in the state, with clients ranging from regional corporations to national brands. A collaboration with them would catapult my business to an entirely different level. As I saved the number to my contacts, I noticed the date on my phone. Exactly 7 months since I'd walked out of my family home with nothing but a duffel bag and determination. In that moment, I understood that rejection hadn't destroyed me. It had directed me toward the path I was always meant to follow. The realization brought not vindication, but gratitude. Without that painful push, I might have spent years, perhaps a lifetime, trying to succeed on terms that were never truly mine, seeking approval that would never fully satisfy. Sometimes the most powerful words we can hear are, "No one wants you here," because they free us to discover where we truly belong. The meeting with Marcus Reynolds changed everything. I arrived at the Elevate Media Group headquarters 30 minutes early, taking time to collect myself in the sleek lobby. The building itself was impressive. 20 stories of glass and steel in the heart of downtown. The company logo displayed prominently across the facade. This was success as my family would recognize it. Corporate, established, undeniable. I smoothed down my jacket, the most expensive piece of clothing I owned, but still modest compared to the designer suits that passed through the lobby. For a moment, doubt crept in. What could the CEO of such an organization possibly want with my small operation? Was this meeting a courtesy, a waste of time, or something else entirely? "Mr. Barrett, Mr. Reynolds is ready for you." A polished assistant led me through security and up to the 18th floor, where floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic views of the city. Marcus Reynolds wasn't what I expected. In his early 40s, he wore jeans and a casual button-down rather than the formal attire I'd anticipated. His office, while spacious, was notably devoid of the status symbols so many executives surrounded themselves with. No prestigious awards on display, no photographs with celebrities or politicians, just a clean, functional workspace and a wall covered in whiteboards filled with strategies and ideas. "Tyler," he said, rising to shake my hand. "Thanks for coming. That was quite a presentation you gave yesterday." "You were there?" I asked, surprised. The CEO of a major marketing firm sitting anonymously in a small business association meeting seemed unlikely. "In the back," he confirmed. "I make it a point to attend local business events regularly. Keeps me connected to what's happening on the ground." He gestured for me to sit. "Your approach to digital marketing for small businesses was refreshing. Practical, innovative, and clearly effective based on the testimonials I heard afterward." I nodded, trying to maintain professional composure. "Thank you. I believe in delivering measurable results rather than just creative concepts. That's exactly why I wanted to meet." Marcus leaned forward slightly. "Here's what I'm thinking. Elevate has built its reputation serving mid-sized to large corporations. We do it well, but we've struggled to develop effective solutions for smaller businesses, the kind you're helping. There's a massive underserved market there." My interest piqued. This wasn't a job offer or an attempt to absorb my client list. It seemed to be something more collaborative. "I'm proposing a partnership," Marcus continued. "Elevate provides resources, infrastructure, and additional expertise. You bring your approach and methodology. Together, we develop a division specifically focused on small business digital marketing solutions." The offer was unexpected and intriguing. What would this partnership look like practically? Would I maintain independence or become an Elevate employee? "Neither exactly," Marcus explained. "I envision a joint venture, legally separate from Elevate but with our financial backing and support resources. You'd maintain creative and operational control while leveraging our infrastructure and reputation. We'd share in the success without absorbing your identity." We spent the next hour discussing specifics, financial arrangements, resource allocation, growth projections. Marcus was transparent about both the opportunities and challenges such a venture would entail. Unlike my family, who had always emphasized security and predictability, Marcus spoke of calculated risks and potential rewards with equal weight. "Take some time to think about it," he said as our meeting concluded. "This isn't a decision to rush. But I believe together we could build something neither of us could create independently." As I left the building, my mind raced with possibilities. The partnership Marcus proposed offered resources I couldn't have accessed for years on my own. It would accelerate my growth trajectory exponentially, while allowing me to maintain the core values and approaches that had proven successful. But, beyond practical considerations, something else resonated. In that meeting, Marcus had offered what my family never had: respect for my vision without conditions or criticism. He hadn't tried to reshape my ideas into something more conventional or practical. He recognized value in my approach precisely because it differed from established methods. Over the following weeks, I consulted with Carlos, a business attorney, and several trusted clients. I evaluated the proposal from every angle, considering potential benefits and risks. The more I analyzed it, the more I became convinced that this partnership represented the right next step, not an escape from challenges, but a strategic advancement of my vision. When I met with Marcus again to accept his offer, he seemed genuinely pleased. "I was hoping you'd say yes," he admitted. "I've been watching your work for several months. You have something most marketers lose as they grow: genuine connection with clients and authentic passion for results rather than just appearances." The next 3 months were transformative. The joint venture, which we named Catalyst Digital Partners, launched with a clear mission: to provide enterprise-level marketing strategies scaled appropriately for growing businesses. We developed proprietary methodologies combining my hands-on approach with Elevate's sophisticated analytics and resources. I assembled a small team of my own choosing, including Carlos, who left his engineering job to head our technical implementation department. Together, we created something that reflected my values while expanding well beyond what I could have built alone in the same time frame. By the 6-month mark, Catalyst had 37 active clients and a growing reputation as the go-to solution for businesses ready to elevate their digital presence without the overhead of traditional agencies. Industry publications began taking notice, with one calling our model the future of digital marketing services: personalized attention backed by enterprise-level resources. The financial success exceeded my most optimistic projections. My personal income had increased tenfold from where I'd started after leaving my family's home. I moved from my modest apartment to a modern loft downtown, furnished it exactly as I wanted, and still had significant savings and investments accumulating. But the true measure of success wasn't financial. It was the freedom to create on my own terms, to build something that reflected my values rather than someone else's expectations. It was walking into meetings confident that my ideas deserved consideration, not because I needed external validation, but because experience had proven their merit. One Thursday afternoon, as I was reviewing quarterly performance metrics with our team, my phone vibrated with an incoming call. The number was vaguely familiar, though I couldn't immediately place it. Stepping into my office to answer, I heard a voice I hadn't heard in nearly 18 months. "Tyler, it's Dad." The simple greeting sent a complex wave of emotions through me: surprise, wariness, a reflexive tension in my shoulders that I hadn't experienced since creating distance from my family. "Dad," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. "This is unexpected." "I know," he said, his voice carrying an unfamiliar hesitancy. "I've been trying to work up the courage to call for weeks." "What's going on?" I asked, unsure whether to expect crisis or reconciliation. "I saw your name in the business journal," he explained. "There was a feature about your partnership with Elevate Media Group, a full-page spread with your picture and everything." Of course, the article had run the previous week, highlighting Catalyst's innovative approach and rapid growth. I should have anticipated that it might eventually reach my family's attention, though I'd given it little thought at the time. "It was a nice piece," I acknowledged, waiting for whatever came next. "Son, He paused, seeming to struggle with his words. "I was wrong. We were wrong. What you're building, what you've accomplished. It's remarkable." The admission hung in the air between us. For years, all I had wanted was this recognition, this acknowledgement that my path had value despite diverging from their expectations. Now that it had finally arrived, I found myself unsure how to respond. "Thank you," I said finally, the words feeling insufficient for the moment. "Your mother and I have been talking," he continued. "We miss you. We'd like to see you, if you're willing. Maybe dinner at the house this Sunday." The invitation triggered conflicting impulses. Part of me craved the closure such a reunion might provide. Another part feared falling back into old patterns, having my hard-won confidence eroded by familiar dynamics. "I'll think about it," I said, neither committing nor refusing outright. "Things are pretty busy with the business right now." "Of course," my father replied quickly. "Just let us know. The door is open whenever you're ready." After we hung up, I sat at my desk, staring out at the city skyline. The irony wasn't lost on me. Only after achieving success in terms they could recognize were they ready to welcome me back. Only now, with external validation from prestigious business publications, was my path considered legitimate. Carlos knocked gently on my open door. "Everything okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." "My father called," I explained, still processing the conversation. "They want me to come to dinner on Sunday." "Are you going to go?" he asked, closing the door and taking a seat across from me. "I don't know," I admitted. Part of me wants to show them what I've built, to see the looks on their faces when they realize how wrong they were about me. But another part wonders if that's even necessary anymore. I don't need their validation the way I once did. Carlos nodded thoughtfully. "The question isn't whether you should prove something to them. It's whether reconnecting with your family adds value to your life." Now, his framing clarified my thinking. This wasn't about vindication. It was about making conscious choices about who and what I allowed into my carefully constructed life. The success I'd built hadn't just been professional or financial. It had been personal, creating an environment where I could thrive without constant criticism or doubt. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.